you were looking for career advice from a career coach, and he had led teams that have placed over 6,000 pros in 21 industries, worked at the largest Fortune 500 recruitment firm in the world, was responsible for over $50 million of placements of executives, and was one of the top recruiters recognized nationally while serving in the United States Army, you'd probably say he's qualified. This is the Executive Career Upgrades Podcast. Career competition is fierce. If you're a director, a VP, or an executive, this podcast is for you. This is the Executive Career Upgrades Podcast. And this is your host, Tim Madden.
All right. How is everybody doing today? Welcome to the Executive Career Upgrades Podcast. Hey, if you don't know me, my name's Tim Madden. We help those here at Executive Career Upgrades targeting six figures or multiple six figures find jobs they love quickly. Hey, we go live each week inside the Executive Career Network on Facebook. Check us out. We are the fastest growing career network. We are approaching 10,000 people from around the globe who are directors, VPs, and executives. And if you're considering a job search in the future and you're not in this group with all of the free resources we get, something's probably not right. Hey, if you're in the ECN watching live right now, say hello. Also to our friends on LinkedIn and YouTube. And of course, you could be listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, Google. We upload everywhere on the internet. Do me a favor. If you could leave me, this is the part where I beg for a review every week, right? If I give you anything valuable on this segment, if you leave us a review over on iTunes or Spotify, it helps get the message out to those other professionals in a career search, because maybe what you share with them today might be exactly what they need to hear to aid them in their career. Hey, just a great month leading up to Christmas. If you're wondering if offers are still coming in, yes, they are. We've had multiple offers still this week as we approach the end of Q4. But without further ado, if you need help in your career, go on over to execupgrades.com/podcast. We have a special treat for you today. Episode 62, making it easier to find tech jobs in an economic downturn, with my good friend, Cory Hollingsworth. Cory, introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Cory Hollingsworth. I've been in the sports industry for about 15 years. I had stints with LA Kings, the LA Clippers, Panini America, the largest trading card company in the world, and currently work in the esports and gaming space with a focus on Web3 and NFTs. Excellent.
Cory, we are glad to have you. Hey, so the first thing we wanted to talk about, right, is the news in the media, even though we love them, right? If things are going bad, they're going to amplify it by a lot. Things are going good, we'll talk about it a little bit. It's kind of like the restaurant review, right? The restaurant review goes like this, okay? For every good experience someone has, I think it's 100 out of 100 people who have a good experience, one person will leave a review. Someone has a bad experience, everyone's going to leave a review, right? So it's kind of one of those things where I think it's very easy to focus on a small snippet of, hey, these three companies aren't doing well, so let's just make a huge generalization on the whole market. So, go ahead and kind of speak to that. What are your thoughts?
What I was going to say was, there was actually a viral TikTok video a few months ago about which restaurant to go to. And you don't go to the one with a 4.68 review because there's too many 5-star reviews and it's not going to actually be that good. You want the ones that are in that 3.5 to 4 because you get valid responses from people who are like, yeah, this was good, but I would have liked this better, or this was great. But, and even saying like, if the service was too good, the food's not going to be good. So, it's always trying to find the right, the right balance of that. And when it comes to trying to figure out, okay, if 100 people have a great experience, but only one leaves a good review, I think about when I was apartment searching years ago in Dallas, when I lived in Dallas, and, you'd look at apartments.com or whichever, I don't necessarily shout them out, but apartment review sites, and you see all these 5-star reviews, most of them are fake. And, you look at the ones that are the 3-star, the 4-star, it's like, hey, I like this, but there's still X, Y, and Z that's not necessarily great. You want that qualitative data, that actually gives you a little bit of background. So, when there's a lot of things that are going well right now, even though, if you focus on the stock market, if you focus on your crypto balance, if you focus on all these other different things, you can see a lot of bad, but there's still a lot of good going on. And just like you said, there are still people who are hiring. There are still people that are growing. And, I experienced a lot of that as a sports industry veteran in the midst of COVID, when every single sports league was completely shut down. So, nobody was hiring. I think actually, when working with Tim, I was on the finish line with two different companies, and this was in March of 2020. And then literally one of them lost 70% of their revenue in 1 week. And the other one had a full hiring freeze that lasted all the way into 2021. So sometimes you got to pivot. And
it's back to the review part. I want to tackle that first. It's like, you need to have good reviews, but you need to have a mix of the bad reviews, Cory. But when people see bad reviews, they can see, this guy was probably, troublesome, right? Based on, you ever leave a review and the review is 5 paragraphs? Something's maybe a little skeptical there, right?
I mean, you love to see, though, when the restaurant comes back and says, yeah, so, you ordered this and asked for no cheese, and then you complain when there was no cheese. So that's the best part, is when you see the real truth behind everything. Yes. And so, exactly. You want to see those reviews that, again, have good meat to them, but you got to know the full story.
Yeah. The other thing is, I want to talk about this for a sec. I know we're going to get into the topic, but with the recession right now, because we were actually talking about this, yesterday, and what we were saying was, and I just have a couple questions for you. Have you went out to eat recently? Was the plate full?
Last weekend, plate was full.
Okay. Have you been to the mall recently, or a shop? Was there other people there?
Went shopping last week. People were still there.
How many of your friends right now have called you and say, I let go because my company has, like, 70% of your friends called you and said, oh my God, I got let go and I don't know what I'm going to do?
Well, when you only have one friend, it's kind of hard to get 70% of them. But I mean, no, I have not had that.
So be very careful, professionals who are watching this, about the news and the media, because I tell you what, so many companies inside technology, and I think we're transitioning to that now in a moment, actually, are having record-breaking years inside tech. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of companies that have record-breaking years, but they're still not profitable. That is not a recession problem. That is a financial responsibility, budgeting, operational issue, right? Because it is still possible to have a record-breaking annual revenue and your P&L still be negative. And there could be multiple reasons it could be negative. It could be you knew you were going to go in debt because you're pushing some new initiative, right? So, one thing I wanted to talk about, everyone's talking about this, Cory, of, downturn, recession, especially in tech. It's been affecting tech. It's obviously affected esports, which you said just as a whole. What's it down 7%? You said.
I think that the esports industry overall is trending. Beginning of 2020 when COVID hit and all of a sudden everything exploded, it started to get real skyrocketing and hyperbolic. But I like that I used a real word and a fake word there at the same time. But it kind of tapered off as there's a lot of different things going on that include cost of goods rising, cost of just typical operations costs rising. But the industry itself is still growing. It's just growing in different ways than it looked like it was going to grow 2 years ago when I talk about esports on that side of things.
Yeah. How possibly can this stay the same, right? Because one thing I think about is we all rely on technology so much. Look at what we're doing right here. We're streaming to multiple places on the internet, which require, where there's a lot of viewers and attention, etc. We are using a streaming platform to do that. We are using 7 technologies right now, and we rely on these so heavily. I got an Amazon Alexa in each part of my house. I'm just thinking about all the tech I got. We got iPhone. We got everything, right? Mm-hmm. Reliance on tech is only going to significantly increase year over year. with project management tools and all of these things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, my question to you is, how can this possibly stay the same when we're headed, when we all utilize all of this so much? I wanted to see what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I mean, I think that you've already seen where a lot of companies are ambitioning to make the things that we do already easier. So, you have a lot of different technologies that are coming. You're talking about 7 different technologies. At some point, there's probably going to only be 3 that accomplish the same thing that 7 do. Back when I was in college, I was actually writing about social media before we even called it social media. And when it came to that, it was like, hey, this is not going to necessarily replace traditional media. Like everybody at the time in the early 2000s saying, oh, this is going to replace traditional media. It doesn't. I mean, TV still exists, radio still exists in different ways than they did 20 years ago. But the funny thing is, right now we're talking about all the different technologies. Amazon, Alexa, or your Google Homes, whatever they augment what you already do. Yeah, they might replace a couple things here and there, but they don't necessarily fully change your behavior. So as far as will it stay the same, probably not. It'll evolve, and we've seen that over and over again, especially in the esports industry. My company works with a really, really big organization that has been around for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years next year. And they have harkened back to, it's like, hey, look at what we did. Look at what our setup was in 2004. Look at these giant CRT, computer screens, and look at all that we did here. And now take a look at what we do. Our computers are 35-inch, curved, beautiful LED screens, and we have all this different technology now that has changed the way that we do what we already do. So will it, stay the same? It won't. It'll evolve, and there will be different things that come out that start to change for the better the way that we do what we do.
Yeah. And just when we talk about just innovation before we get into the next topic, I remember when we worked together in the midst of COVID, and companies just have to get creative. Like if they can't figure out, right, they may have to switch and pivot. And I know one of the biggest things esports companies, specifically NFL, those teams were doing is they were partnering with companies like yours. And here's the thing, you get the Dallas quarterback to stream on Facebook or Twitch playing Madden or playing a game, they're getting tens of thousands of viewers. And you can't tell me that Tide and Clorox and all of these mainstream brands are going to spend a lot of money, on those advertisers. So it's one of those things where, you just got to figure it out sometimes. Yeah.
And, in the downturn or, in the shutdown, we actually saw so many athletes turning to esports and gaming. And, esports is kind of this general idea. There's 2 different kind of worlds under this banner of video games, I guess. And just to give for a quick clarification, esports is that competitive organization of people playing against each other. So that's where you have, big organizations like FaZe Clan and Astralis and these large teams that almost operate like sports teams do, where they have a full staff of people who are executives, social media people, marketing people, sponsorships people, all that. Gaming is just this other kind of juggernaut where esports might be about a $1.9 billion industry right now, and that even kind of varies. Gaming is about 180 billion, depending on who you ask. And we've even seen people like, Netflix is building a whole new video game division.
Yeah, I saw that.
Other companies are building gaming divisions. So, it's this big kind of banner and big area. But I say all that just because during COVID, when everybody was shut down, players couldn't go and do what they do. We saw the NBA pivot, and they put on a special tournament that included people like Devin Booker, Paul George, Kevin Durant, big superstars, household names who were playing NBA 2K against other superstars. And, it got broadcast on ESPN. It was a big thing on Twitch as well. A couple of the players actually were already building up their Twitch personas. Devin Booker in the offseason, Devin Booker's a superstar for the Phoenix Suns. And he actually, during his offseason, has an entire setup that, he streams regularly. Paul George is the same way. And you started to see where some of these people who've already built a personality and built all this thrived. But then you have somebody like Kevin Durant and a couple of others who, they play, they don't necessarily stream. And so you saw, okay, well, now I'm just playing video games. But you still had a lot of viewership. The MLB did the same thing. They did a tournament. Actually, the Seattle Mariners did one of the most successful ones that I saw, where they had, I think it was 8 players and then 8 fans who got to compete in an MLB The Show competition. And the coolest thing about that was it was about engagement, and it was about, I think that they got T-Mobile or another Seattle kind of based company to come in and sponsor it. And, you saw a number of other brands, just like you were mentioning, Tim. Chipotle had already been big into gaming, but then they started really diving into that. I think Toyota did a couple of things. There were a few other big companies that aren't endemic to gaming who jumped in during the pandemic to do a couple of different things because they saw engagement. They saw these known commodities of athletes jumping into gaming, and they saw the opportunity there to get exposure and get brand engagement, which was really exciting to see.
Yeah. What about, so hey, some people, a decent amount of people got laid off recently at some large companies, which put a lot of people kind of freaking out a little bit, right? So how, right, I know we put tech here, but I'm going to keep repeating this on every ECU podcast, right? Getting the job and money you deserve is the same process. Esports, tech, gaming, top consulting companies, right? So if you're looking to find a job during this economic downturn, let me be the first to tell you, there are companies that are doing well. Even during COVID, what companies weren't doing well? Hospitality, right? What companies were doing well? Supply and logistics, right? So it's kind of one of those things, but even inside the same industry, you'll see that some companies are failing while other companies are thriving. So how do we really identify, right, those companies? One of my favorite ways is you can go to the Inc. 5000 list right now, which is the 5,000 fastest growing companies in America. And you can search by technology, you can search by whatever you want to, and a big list is going to come saying these are all of the companies. This was their revenue growth. This is how much they grew, etc. So Cory, kind of walk people through, what would your advice be of, hey, I'm in tech, I just got laid off, right? Besides, what am I going to do next, right? Because I know that you were in a similar situation a couple of years ago. What advice would you have for these individuals?
So some of the biggest things, just like you were mentioning, there have been so many tech layoffs, right? And people kind of look at that as like, oh my gosh, it's doom and gloom. But then you see it's an endemic thing. It's happening across the board. So that there are going to be companies that are going to at some point be replacing those people. But also take a look and say, okay, which companies haven't done any layoffs? Which companies are hiring right now, even if it's not my skill set? If I am an engineer, I'm not necessarily going to be going after a public relations role. But you can see that this company is hiring people in PR and sales and all these other things. Then you can at least go and potentially be like, hey, I see that there's a lot of growth in your company. I wanted to see if there's any kind of opportunity for, any other engineer growth potentially. You can take a look and see what the bigger picture looks like for these companies. But also, it allows you to, a lot of times if you've been at the same company for a long time, you get tunnel vision. You see everything through the lens of
your environment.
Company. Yeah, exactly.
Your environment. Yeah,
you are. And because of that, a lot of times you can't think outside of that vision. And for me, when I left my previous company, it was like, wow, okay. It was like everything has, like the vision all of a sudden got wider. And it was like, okay, what, and again, this was like 8 weeks before COVID hit. So everything changed, but that's a whole different discussion. But, it allowed me to take a look and say, okay, what is out there? Would I have looked at this company 6 months ago? Probably not. What are ways that I can add value to this company with my skill set and what I have to offer? What does a brand professional who specializes in brand strategy and product development, what does that mean for this company that builds trains? And that's just a pure hypothetical, but, understanding the value that you have and what you can bring, whether that's in your industry or outside of it. And so a lot of that is personal development. A lot of that is just kind of, I joke with people that I spent most of 2020 doing my own personal business development where, understanding who these companies are, what they do, why they exist, and what value could be added to them.
Yeah, because you were not head of partnerships at your past company, and it was not an esports company. So you did something totally different, right?
Yep.
And what you had to do was, just like you said, get in front of those people and show how you can add value. Because you can't tell me right now, if you're in tech, and I don't care what job you have in tech, if you sell SaaS products, if you're a product manager, whatever you do, okay, another company inside tech that is doing well probably has a spot for you. But they are not going to call you. They are not going to come and knock on your door. They are not going to make all your dreams come true, right? You have to show the initiative of getting a hold of those people and say, hey, this is my background. I saw how much growth you did. Here's the value I can add to your team. And I thought it makes sense to have a conversation.
Exactly. And, you can't just sit there and, throw your hands up and wondering why you're not working at Facebook, Google, or Meta, Google, Amazon, or whoever, when you don't have any lines with them, or when you don't have a public presence, or it's like if I've been kind of in the working in the mines, and I'm not wondering, oh gosh, why hasn't this other mine contacted me? It's like, well, I've been in the mine. So understanding how to present yourself in that side of things too is super important.
Yeah. And the biggest thing I want to leave, and then we'll wrap up with some final comments. Write this down, everybody. You get what you believe. You get what you believe. You get what you believe, and you get what you focus on. And if you're going to sit every day because you got let go at Facebook, Meta, Amazon, wherever, if you're going to focus every day saying, I'm devastated, oh my God, and I'm looking at the news and all these tech layoffs, that is not going to be a good next, 2023 for you, right? So what is the reality? How many tech companies are actually affected? How many companies are doing well? How many companies had record-breaking years? How many companies are up 400%? How can you identify those companies? How can you get in front of people that can hire you? Right?
Yeah,
that is going to be very important as we transition.
And the funny thing is, like you mentioned, I was not head of partnerships at my previous company. I was a brand manager. I handled, a bunch of releases, about 20 releases a year, 20 products a year that had to be released. Managing strategic partnerships with people in those licenses. So, people at the NFL, people at the NBA and players associations and things like that. Managing relationships, while that wasn't necessarily the vital core function of what I was doing. But understanding it's like, well, that all the elements of the recipe, the ingredients of the recipe are there. And it's like, well, hey, actually, I really love the idea of building partnerships, even though I've been doing something completely different. But understanding it's like, if you have flour, water, salt, and yeast, you can make a lot of different things with that. You might have been making tortillas before, but now you can make sourdough bread. You can actually do something that's going to be completely different. I say that just because I went from doing something that was very siloed and kind of niche to something where it's like, hey, this is head of partnerships and brand engagement. So I'm working on partnerships where we're trying to bring people into our platform, but we're also trying to understand the use cases of the technology, how to translate that to these clients and different things in that side. And so a lot of that is just being able to say, hey, I like this. I want to do this. How can I get there? And, rather than taking a look and saying, oh, I don't have 5 years of direct B2B selling experience, so I can't do this. But understanding
it's funny because we have a person who was considering working with us, right? And she said, for the new job that I want, when I'm looking online at some of the job descriptions, considering what I'm going to do next, she's like, I really only have 70% of what they actually said. And I was kind of thinking I remember when I was a headhunter many years ago, I maybe in 10 years found one person who had every single thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is impossible, right? Because let's take, for instance, when you transition into the role, right? If you looked at the job description, did you have anything? I mean, you didn't have 100% of what they're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, if they had created it, and this was actually one that was, they knew that they wanted somebody who was to be the head of partnerships. They didn't necessarily have the role straight out, but if they had actually created one and use that as a litmus
You wouldn't
test.
have qualified.
I might not have qualified. Yeah. I've seen other companies where I'm like, oh, this is going to be like, this was during the downturn actually, or during 2020, where I was like, oh my gosh, I fit all of these. This is a perfect opportunity for me. Didn't even get anything.
Yeah.
And that was even using, honestly, your method where it was like, I reached out to people. I tried to get the job description was already there, and so they already had that need. And it was like, okay, hey, I think I fit a lot of these boxes. I think I would be a great fit. I would be a huge asset for you. Not a reply.
If anyone who's listening, the number one complaint we get from people thinking about considering using our services is I keep applying for jobs online and no one calls me back. So please take what Cory just said of he found all of these roles he was perfect for. I know his resume was optimized and had all the fancy keywords, right? Applying online is not the way to become the head of partnerships and brand engagement in an industry that you've never been in, okay? It's not the way to go into your new tech job, okay? Because so many people were laid off, right? Inside tech right now, like 30K or something. That's a lot into the market right now of competition. So if you're going to try to compete, right, with your resume, it's not going to go well for you, right? So my best advice is always hunt people down on LinkedIn, right? If I know Cory works at whatever company and I see that they're at 200% growth this year, regardless of if they have positions posted, if I know I can add value in any way because I'm a PMP, a developer, whatever, right? I'm going to get a hold of Cory and say just what we had mentioned earlier, right? So do not, right, just think that you're going to pay a couple $100 for a resume, sit back, right? I know all you listening to this make between 6 figures and 7 figures, right? You're not going to get these high level jobs by clicking apply and hoping someone calls you, right? Show value. And that's what actually I want to make sure that we do this, right? As the last comment, right, is how can you add value? How can you add value? That's what Cory's saying. He's just saying, this is how I'm good at my job. How can I add value to the clients? How can I make my service better? See how we're talking about value. So how is you as a job seeker right now? How can you show value in a short amount of time to someone who might potentially have an opportunity for you? Why should they talk to you? What's in your background? Have you had any accomplishments? Have you had any measurable achievements? Why should they talk to you? Right? So be sure as we transition, right? Know what you're targeting. Find companies on the Inc. 5000 list per your industry that are doing well. Reach out to the appropriate people. And if I mean appropriate, if I'm at the VP level, I'm hitting the C-suite. If I'm a director, I'm hitting this, right? You know the hierarchy of these systems, and these people are very easy to find on LinkedIn, and they need talent like you. Okay? They need talent like you. Cory, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Any final comments for individuals listening to our podcast?
I mean, just exactly what we just said, where it's about adding value. It is understanding what value you bring, what you can bring to the table, and how that can translate to the company that you're going to work for. Add value, add value, add value. That's like, if the sales mantra is always be closing, for me, it's like, it's always be adding value. ABAV is kind of not really as clever, unfortunately, but I think that it's always about adding value, because regardless of if you're an engineer, a salesperson, head of communications, whatever it is, the goal is adding value. And that's ultimately what I think is the better, kind of lens that you can look at when, in whatever you're doing in your job. Thank you so much, Cory. And remember, you get what you focus on. If you're going to sit there every day saying this is never going to happen for me, it's going to be a rough time for you. Okay. If you're one of these people that's going to have a high level of commitment, because those people that are consistently consistent will always achieve their goal. Remember that. Those that are inconsistently consistent rarely do. Until next week, hey, have a very Merry Christmas and very happy holidays to the whole, Executive Career Upgrades podcast. We wish you, be sure to spend some time with your family. Be sure to relax and re-energize. Don't take too much time off. Tim Madden says you can have Sunday, right? But besides that, hey, we got work to do. And if you need help in your career, go over to execupgrades.com/podcast. Cory, thanks so much for joining us, and see you guys next week.